and as she drove past the bland strip malls of San Bernardino and into the arid drama of the Mojave, Ruth's anger with her daughter melted away, leaving admiration for her boldness. Ruth had never been able to tell a fib with a straight face at Sabrina's age. Perhaps her life would have been easier if she had. And Sabrina's life was easy. That was what their fight had been about in the first place, that Sabrina wanted for nothing. So what if those girls had ganged up on her? Stop moping. Move on. She needed to toughen up if she was going to be anything in this world. Grow some thicker skin. But this advice had only made Sabrina sob harder, screaming at Ruth about how she didn't get it and to get out of her room and leave her alone. Ruth, unmoved by the histrionics, had heeded her demands, comforted only slightly by the knowledge that Sabrina would be Steve's problem for the weekend. It grew dark, and if it weren't for her GPS, Ruth would have missed the turn for Trigger, a dirt road off Highway 62. So far as she could remember, there had been no mention of a dirt road in the listing. Slowly, carefully, she steered the Subaru over rocks, wincing as brush scraped the sides, braking just in time for a coyote to trot through her high beams, out on its evening scavenge. Finally, the trailer appeared, gleaming in her brights. Now, after a fitful night's sleep on the thin foam mattress, she sat at the worn slab of formica that passed as a kitchen table, where for the past 3 hours she had been staring into her laptop screen, cold coffee and blank yellow legal pad at her side. Was the protagonist abused as a child? Was she involved in a sex trafficking ring? Or maybe kiddie porn? Parents who took cash and looked the other way? Was she held captive, shackled in a basement somewhere on a quiet, tree-lined suburban street? She listed them all on her legal pad, each more ghoulish than the last, these ideas for how to dial it up. This was how she used to work in the old days. Black coffee and a notepad she filled with grisly dismemberments and sadistic plot twists. This script was, for Ruth, a return to form. It was supposed to be her comeback. She'd been something of an indie darling early on in her career, a woman filmmaker who wasn't afraid of blood and guts. Her first feature, Blood Bouquet, shot on a shoestring, was a cult favorite, a slasher flick featuring a killer bride. Then came Cherry Split, her most acclaimed work, a thriller about a stripper who picks off every man who's wronged her. A-list actresses took notice. How refreshing it was, one said, to finally have a woman's take on the genre. A major studio had shown interest in her next project, slated to be her bloodiest yet, about a housewife who tortures her abusive husband to death. But it never got made. In the early aughts, Sabrina was born and Ruth couldn't finish the script. Her creative output slowed. She cobbled together an income to supplement Steve's admittedly heftier one by doctoring scripts and shooting commercials. She told her friends that she'd lost the bug, or that she was too busy parenting, but the truth was that something had shifted in her when her daughter came along. In Ruth's mind, every brutal rape, every strangulation, every artfully choreographed stabbing was happening to Sabrina. Her protagonist felt more alive than ever because to Ruth her protagonist was her daughter. She tried writing something else, changing course, a sweet coming-of-age tale, but producers scoffed. No one, they said, would want to see a Ruth Grayson movie without blood. Perhaps she'd gone soft after having a kid. It wasn't unusual for that kind of thing to happen to women. Ruth and Steve fought, grew distant, and finally separated. Divorce papers were signed. It was mostly amicable. She threw herself into her freelance work. What was the point in trying to create something of her own in a system with the odds so stacked against her? Then, a couple of years ago, a programmer had discovered her old films and invited her to do a Q&A at a screening. The event was written up and made the rounds in cinephile circles. There was something so feminine about the rage of these working-class women protagonists, said the critics. A feral viciousness that couldn't be captured by a man.